Hi there, welcome to our kitchen. So I've been asked to make macarons, so apparently I'm making macarons today, or trying to. I've made them a few times before, I've got them right a couple times, but they're notoriously hard to do. So if we mess up, we mess up. It's not the end of the world, they'll still taste nice. So macarons, I don't really know how to explain them per se. It's kind of mostly just almonds and eggs. Like we make a meringue and we mix that into like an almond mix and bake them. There's lots of different flavours of macarons. They're kind of very easy to flavour. You don't need a lot to make them very like strong flavour. I think it's about a quarter of a teaspoon or something. They're quite expensive if you want to buy them because almonds are very expensive. I use ground almonds, but most of the time if you look for a recipe it will say to use almond flour or very, very, very fine ground almonds. So we have a way around that today. I need to put you down, you're heavy. So I've got the recipe from Tasty, I believe it was. I've used a couple of other ones and they didn't really go that well. I found this one worked quite well with a few adjustments, so it is slightly off that recipe. But in itself it's, I want to remember, 95 grams of ground almonds, 210 of icing sugar, pinch of salt. Then it is, sorry, I'm running through the recipe in my head, I should have written it down. 3 egg whites, 50 grams of caster sugar, a tablespoon of cream of tartar, quarter of a teaspoon of flavouring, I'm using orange today, then food colouring to colour. It normally says a few drops, but our food colouring is terrible, so. And then whatever filling you want, I'm going to be making a dark chocolate ganache. There we go. It's quite a long process to make macarons. I mean, there's kind of making the mix, then we're going to leave it for a while, and we're going to bake it, and then let them cool and fill them, so it's total probably 3-4 hours. But a lot of it's just kind of leaving them. So, yeah. We're going to start by weighing out the almonds and the sugar, and then we're going to blitz them so that it's a finer mix. The dog just burped. I don't know how loud that was funny. Yeah, we're going to mix them to a finer point so that it's a very decent like powder when it goes into the meringue mix. So 95 of ground almonds and 210 of icing sugar. After I weighed out the almonds and the icing sugar, I quickly weighed up the caster sugar and the cream of tartar, mixed it together like lightly so that it's fully combined. That's just for later. I thought it was easier while we're weighing stuff, we'll weigh that as well. And from there, we're going to be putting the almond mix, I'm pointing behind me, no one can see that, into the food processor so that we're going to get it down to like a very fine point, I don't know. We're gonna put the almonds in the food processor so that it's just easier to mix later. Get in.
Icing sugar powder. There's your outtake right there.
Yeah. I mean, we're gonna blitz it. It's gonna get loud, so I'm gonna have to take the audio off. I'm just going to sift this to make sure it's all fine, and then we'll get rid of anything that's too big. As I said, we just need to make sure that this mix is fine enough to mix like nicely with the meringue we're going to be making in a second. Oh lord. I hate sifting stuff. As I said, when that's done, we're going to discard anything left here because it's going to be too thick to go into the macaron, and that is fine. The next step is kind of the harder part of macarons. We're going to be making a meringue. We're not going to be making a meringue that kind of goes on like a lemon meringue pie, meringue nest. We're not using hot simple syrup in it. It's more of a raw meringue. We're just whipping the eggs to a meringue state, adding sugar and cream of tartar to get them nice and stiff, and then we'll be baking them off. We'll mix our almond and sugar mix into it and bake them off later. That's why it has to stay raw, because we can't double bake a meringue, it goes too hard. This is the stage that normally I will mess up, which is kind of good. We have a lot of eggs, so if I mess it up I can just try and do it again. If you carry on from messing that up and you already add your almond mix, you can't really salvage it from there. I need to separate some eggs. We only want the whites, not the yolks, so I'm going to put them in a separate container. If you get any yolk in your whites, it's going to mess up the whole meringue. So, what I do, I actually have a little system. I crack them into a separate bowl. If the yolk breaks, I can get rid of the whole egg, or keep it to make like scrambled eggs or an omelette or whatever later. And if I crack it, separate them, and I'm left with egg whites, I pour it straight into my mixer, ready to go, so that I don't have 2 egg whites, then crack a third and it breaks, kind of thing. Okay. I also separate them by hand, which is something a lot of people, I don't know, it's kind of a mixed thing. Some people recommend it, some people don't. As long as your hands are clean, it's fine. Although saying that, I need to take my rings off because I don't want my rings covered in egg. If you do it the shell way, of kind of dividing it between the shells, you might puncture the yolk, and obviously, as I said, you don't want any yolk in this. There's other ways of doing it, like the life hack using like a plastic bottle to like suction it, or there's devices for that. That works quite well, or like an egg separating thing, that works really well. I don't have those things, so I'm using my hands. Which is kind of gross. I have nowhere to put these. Literally all I do is crack it into this bowl and pull the yolk out. Let's do that. Ugh. Ew. If you hate the feeling of egg whites, don't do this.
Very slimy.
Yeah, it is. Really gross. And as I said, after each egg, I chuck the white ready into my mixer. If you end up doing this and having a bunch of egg yolks because you've messed up your meringue, you can make custard, I think. Custard is made with egg yolks. As I said, meringue is kind of hard. Once you get it down, it's kind of easy, but I always seem to mess this step up. As I said, I'm using my mixer. You can do this by hand, but it'll take you a hell of a long time. And what you want to do is you want to start quite like medium low or medium kind of speed until it gets frothy, and then we can begin adding the sugar and tartar mix. And what that'll do is that'll kind of help form stiff peaks, and that's how we know that it's gone to a meringue. Our mixer's having issues at the minute, so now and the last time I made them, it's not managing to quite get the eggs at the bottom, it's not fully incorporating them. So the top gets to stiff peaks, but the bottom isn't ready. So I'm finishing it by hand whisking it today. And you can tell your meringue is ready to be mixed with that when if you tip the bowl up, it doesn't move. It's a very risky procedure, so start slowly. That's risky. See?
Hold it over your head, that's the real risky.
I don't want to do that.
It's fine.
Yeah, but they're ready.
Yeah.
Like, they're very stiff. When you start going from here, you've got to work very fast. When we incorporate the almond mix, we can't stop. I can't take break, like, I can't have pauses to talk. I'm going to have to talk and do stuff. But now that it's at that point, I'm going to add my flavouring and whip it in very quickly. And then I'll add the almond mix and the food colouring, folding it, not using a whisk. Turn it behind me. Yeah. If this buggers my eggs up, I'm going to be really annoyed. Alright. We're good. What I'm going to do is I'm going to add a little bit at a time. Well, not a little bit, probably like a quarter, maybe at a time. Fold it in, and then add the next bit until we reach the right consistency, which I'll try and show to the camera very quickly. But we need it to be pretty much fully incorporated before we add the next lot.
But you're folding, you're not mixing.
Yeah, it's kind of different. So when you fold, you want to drag around the edge of the bowl and get underneath. I find it easier to turn the bowl at the same time. And that way, that is the best way of fully incorporating a wet and a dry mix together. Especially because we put so much air into the eggs, we don't want to be knocking a lot of the air out. Right. Last bit, I need to add my food colouring very quickly. I have no measurement for food colouring because ours is kind of meh.
It's gel, isn't it, that?
Yeah, you would want to use a gel food colouring, not a liquid one, because the liquid one changes the whole consistency of the mix. There is a test to see if your mix is at the right consistency, and it's called a figure 8 test. It just means that the little drip, you can draw a figure 8 and it won't break away from itself. Mine is, let's see, mine is there. As I said, we're going to move quickly because heat reacts to this very weirdly, so I'm going to have to pipe them pretty quickly. As you can see, I set my piping bag up earlier. I just put it into a tall glass, essentially.
Then you fold the edges and...
Yeah, you roll the edges, like the tops, over the side. So that way you've got like a little bit at the top that you can work with. I'm going to have to probably do 2 passes of this, because I don't want to overfill the piping bag. A good way of doing this as well, if you put like little dots of the mix in the corner, it'll hold the parchment down, so that they won't move at all when baking, and it shouldn't affect the shape of the macarons. Boop, boop. And at this point you have got to work quickly because the heat from your hand, as I said, is what messes with the consistency of the macarons. You want to form them into roughly like 2p shapes, 2p piece sizes. I just do dollops and move, dollop, and move. As they're sitting, they'll spread out a little bit, but the main kind of goal when we're doing this is to make sure they're roughly even sizes and they don't spread too much. So you want to leave a little bit of a gap between them. What you want to do when you've finished piping them all, take a breather, and then we're going to hit them on something hard. I use the side next to my oven. Just 3 times, quite hard, quite fast. It will knock the air out and you can see bubbles forming on the surface. This is so that there's no bubbles forming into the macaron, because that will mean that you have a hollow shell, which is bad. You don't want a hollow shell. So once you've tapped them on the surface, got the air bubbles out, we're actually going to leave them on the side. You want them to form a shell or a skin. Most recipes will say anywhere between like 20 and 40 minutes. I found that these take about an hour, roughly, but like somewhere between 30 minutes and an hour. There's a couple things you can do to help. If it's too hot in the kitchen, try and cool it down somehow, because actually the cold will help them form. Another good tip is, there's a reason they're on the oven, I use the induction in our oven to help form a shell. As I said, I do it for about an hour. I'll check them at about half an hour, and if they're on their way, I'll preheat the oven. But yeah, now we just wait until the shells are formed, essentially. So we're back when they are. So they've been out here for about 40 minutes. I checked them at about half an hour, like I said. They're pretty much ready to go. When I check them, I start to preheat the oven. I set it to 150 in a fan oven. I've set it up very specifically. What I've done is I've put the rack in the middle that I'm going to be baking them on, and I've put a tray on the top rack so that they don't brown too much on top. We're going to be baking them 1 tray at a time, because they need to be at kind of the right level in the oven. Takes a while, but it'll be fine. And as I said, they were nearly ready, but they're definitely ready now. You'll know that they're ready to go in the oven when you kind of run your finger over them and nothing sticks to you. It has like a noticeable shell, essentially, which is why it's called forming a shell. So we're going to start baking them, I guess. As I said, I'm doing them one tray at a time, so I'll probably just go left to right. And when they're out, we're going to leave them to cool on the tray, 10-15 minutes, and then we'll move them to a wire rack. But yeah. Time off for 17 minutes. Oh yeah. They're baking for 17 minutes, I just realised I didn't actually say that. So I'm setting a timer on my phone. So while they're baking, just a few other talking points. You can flavour them how you want, it's just I really like chocolate orange. So I'm making orange macarons with a dark chocolate ganache in the middle. As I said, you can flavour them how you want, just be a little bit wary about flavouring them, because some are stronger than others. You can't have too much liquid, because otherwise the mix won't mix right. You need to then counteract by adding more dry goods, such as the icing sugar and the ground almonds. I've definitely messed it up in the past when I've tried to make coffee flavoured ones. It was too wet and they just didn't work. When I piped them out, they just spread. But, you know, do what you want. There's a thing on Reddit, there's a subreddit on Reddit called Baking. A lot of people on there make macarons. They're very nice looking. A lot of them will share their recipes, share techniques, things like that, if you want some kind of inspiration for it. So it's been a couple of hours. We're back. We had tea in the middle of that because it was like 5 o'clock and we were hungry. So the macarons themselves have fully cooled. As I said, I took them out. As I said, I took them out of the oven, let them sit on the tray for about 20 minutes, and then peeled them off the parchment. And they're all here, ready to go. So I'm going to make a ganache, because I'm filling mine with a ganache. And literally, my ganache, the one I do anyway, is 150 ml of cream, 150 grams of chocolate. We're going to heat the cream up, pour it in the chocolate. Might add a little bit of butter if it's getting a bit hard, but it's pretty simple. So I'm just going to heat the cream.
I've also matched the shells.
Yeah. And in that break, Sam decided to match all the shells to make it easier when we're actually like putting them together. But there is going to be another short break because I have to actually let the ganache cool a little bit, because when it's hot it's really runny and it'll just kind of bleak out the sides of the macarons, so I'm going to let it cool a little bit. If you're making a ganache, when you're heating cream, just try and give it movement every so often because it can burn to the bottom. We're just going to pull it off as soon as we see it to bubble on its own without any movement. You don't want it to hit boiling because it kind of starts to render out the fat and it makes the ganache go a little bit weird. You just want it to be, the heat's just starting to get to it and it's not boiling, it's like just about to boil. Really, it doesn't take long. I'm using my smallest ring on like a medium heat, just because I want it to be done quite quickly. I also chopped my chocolate. I don't know if it was in shot or not, so I just grabbed it. It's a little bit easier to use chocolate chips. I just didn't have any dark chocolate chips at the minute, so I just grabbed normal dark chocolate, cut it up. Doesn't need to be too small, that's one of the bigger bits. But there's lots of little small bits, and that'll start it off when we're actually mixing the cream in. I have to pour it against the camera, I'm sorry. That should be hot enough anyway. This one, when you put the cream in, you just got to kind of mix it until it's one fully cohesive mix. Don't take too long, especially depending on how big or small your chocolate is. So like that's done already. Mixed to a nice ganache. Like at this point, as I said, it's quite wet, so it won't fill the macarons very well. It will just kind of leak out the side. So I'm just going to put it in the fridge for about 10-15 minutes. Or what you can do, if you want chocolate ganache but you don't want it to be like this, I don't know why, you can whip chocolate ganache, because it's obviously so much cream in it, it'll whip to like a very, I don't know, rich chocolate cream, I guess. I've done it before. I just prefer proper ganache. When the ganache is set, you want to pour it into a piping bag, then make a little hole at the end, and we're going to pipe it straight onto one side of the macaron. You don't want to get it all the way to the edge because we're going to lightly smush them together, and if it's too close to the edge, it will spill out of the sides. There we go, there's the macarons done. You can tell that they're pretty much right by the fact they have feet, which is kind of this bit here. It's hard to point while I'm doing it. So this bit under the top of the shell is called the feet. They're meant to go up, not out. So they're pretty good. They're not perfect because some of them did come out hollow, which meant that some of them still had air bubbles in. So if you're following along, just tap them an extra few times. So just a few final talking points before we go. One, I'm sorry for how kind of choppy this video is. As I said, it's a very long process, so there was kind of a lot of waiting times in between. So it might jump a little bit. I'm pretty sure I've said everything I needed to say about actually making them. I hope. If not, find a recipe. Also, just from a personal perspective, I'm really proud of how these actually turned out. These are probably some of the best I've ever done. I'm like, especially this little guy, I'm very proud of this little guy right here. This one specifically, which is really sad, but like, I think they look really good. As I said, they're not perfect because some of them came out hollow, but none of them cracked. The colour's consistent, they got good feet, they taste great. What more could you want from a macaron? And it's macaron, not macaroon. Macaroon is a coconut thing. I don't like those. So, like I've done with the other recipes, I'll put the recipe for this one in the description. I'll also try, and in the recipe itself, I'll add like a little tips and tricks section, because I do some very strange things in this video. I'll also put like a little FAQ, kind of what went wrong sheet that I found before, in case you make them and something's wrong, you can refer back to that to see what happened and try and resolve it for the next time. I think that's it from us. He doesn't care, so we're just going to go, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye. I'm working, bitch.